back to another CSR2 video. Let's talk about this Halloween event that's coming up and my perspective on this. Let's first take a look at the event challenges. So you have 4 lock-ins, but you notice that you will have, again, multiple speed traps, relays, and some sprints. However, notice there are generally much more relays and speed traps, and generally looking at it, I would say there are some sprint challenges, but not that many compared to both relays and speed traps. This means in order to easily get through this event, you have to consider your car options for the relays, as well as any car you pick should be at least decent at speed traps and okay at sprints. The sprint challenges are not likely to be super difficult, but again, you want to have the right cars for speed traps. That means when you pick your lock-in, and this is true of any event, you always want to pick the car that you have that is the most close to fully maxed. Sometimes a slightly slower car that is fully maxed may be better than theoretically faster cars that's missing too many fusions. Always keep that in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is lock-in number 1 is both T2 and T1 cars. If you have a fully maxed T1, there's nothing wrong with using that over burning a T2 car right away for the lock-in, because when you go to lock-in number 2, you'll see that it again is multi-tier. Now it is moved up to T3 and T2 cars. So if you have 2 very fully built T2 cars, you can theoretically lock in two T2 cars for the 1 and 2 lock-in, rather than having a T3 and a T2, or you can do a T1/T2 if you don't really have that many Tier 2 cars. So there's something here to be looked at and thought of before you lock them in. Is, you always want to lock in the strongest car you have. But let's say if you're relatively new, you have 1 strong T1, 1 strong T2, and 1 strong T3, you may not want to lock in the first lock-in with the T2 car. You may want to actually use the T1 car, and then second lock-in with the T2, and the third lock-in with potentially the T3, T4 cars. Because it looks like the third lock-in is where it starts to really, I have a lot of T4s apparently, but the third lock-in allows you to use T3 cars still. So you notice here the pattern, right? T1, T2, T2, T3, T3, T4. But you don't have to use the higher tier car if you don't have it built right. Where you're really going to start getting some difficulty is right here on the final lock-in, because this is where they put the hurdle in. You've gotten pretty far at this point. You probably made it through, 3/4 of the way, and that goal is in sight. This is when they start throwing in hurdles, and that is because you can only use 2 cars, the AMG GTR and the C10 Tiffany. However, the GTR has various versions, including the Halloween version from before, so you can potentially have a GTR that's already built. And then the C10 Tiffany, which is a relatively rare car unless you got it way back as a milestone, and there was a Purple Star version as well. That was from one of the events. So if you've been around forever, of course, you'll have these cars. But if you were to have to pull for gold, either car, I would say ultimately they're about on par with each other with regard to difficulty to build. Mercedes Fusions, Chevy Fusions, both are hard. But there are more good Chevys in the game than there are good Mercedes. So you want to keep that in mind, that you may actually want to ultimately, even if this Tiffany gets built and you end up with surplus green Fusions, it might be better to have Chevy than it is to have Mercedes. However, if you joined the game in the last few months, because we had a milestone car that was a Mercedes, you may have some extra Mercedes Fusion sitting around. Look at your Fusion stuff. Make a judgment call. I don't think this event's going to be super difficult, but it's not going to be a walk in the park either. So keep in mind that lock-in 1, 2, 3 is pretty flexible, and lock-in 4 is not flexible. If you want to finish the event, you definitely want to always lock in cars that are as close to fully max as possible. And if it's a difference between a tier 1 that's fully maxed and a tier 2 that's missing a bunch of fusions, go with the tier 1. Okay, and the same applies all the way through to the third lock-in. The game challenges will be different depending on what kind of car you lock in. So these times are going to be different if you locked in T1, T2, T3, and T5 versus if you had T2, T2, T3, or T1, T3, and T4. Everybody's going to have different things. So it's going to be a lot harder, I think, for us to tell you, or anybody to tell you, oh, this is the exact time you're going to face because of the variation in lock-ins. This reminds me a little bit of the way the Ford Performance event is set up, because depending on which Ford GT you use, they actually adjust the difficulties. And it's so we know it's not hard for Natural Motion to do that, and they probably did that for this. Ultimately, from past Halloween event experience, most of these Halloween events are not super hard. They're supposed to be, I wouldn't say easy, but they're challenging but not extreme. So keep that in mind. Are you, as a brand new player who only played for 2 months, going to make it through this? Probably not without spending. Okay, if you're a veteran player, chances are, if you've been playing for at least a year and you have either AMG GTR or C10, you'll make it through this event. You may have to burn some keys, but it shouldn't be so difficult that you're going to be complaining the whole way. So that's my take on this Halloween event. Good luck this season with it. Once it's active tomorrow, I'm sure more information will come out from various people, both on Reddit, Facebook, and on YouTube. And you can always wait a day before jumping in, or wait a day or two before jumping in, so you can take advantage of the information coming from people who are rushing through, so you get a better feel for what you need to do. As always, feel free to ask me questions on the channel. If you like the video, please leave a like, and please subscribe so you can get notifications. As always, thank you for watching my videos. I'll catch you next time.